Hello and welcome back to another episode of what do we call this thing?
Three black
Three
grads.
black
Three
brats.
black Brad grads. We are three black Brad graduates from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, and in Brooklyn, New York, the fine art program. We are all we graduated from the fine art photography program at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. Did I say that twice? My name is Greg Lakeborn. I'm here with my buds Ken Nelson and Mark Skinner, and we get together. We've been getting together since Pratt. Showing work, doing work, sharing experiences, and we just started this YouTube page so that we could talk about photography, continue our discussion about photography, and continue like a little critique and such about what's happening in photography nowadays, and et cetera, et cetera. Now today's topic. Well, first I want to say thoughts and prayers to the folks in Ukraine, all the madness going on over there. But okay, we're bringing back to this world, which I want to which kind of ties into the topic. Today's topic is say what? We're talking about Artspeak. Now I was thinking Artspeak for the longest when we sat in our lectures and they're talking about this photographer or that artist and this art movement and that art movement, and they start. I'll never forget that there was this introduction to Susan Sontag, and oh my gosh, I was walking through the wilderness. I didn't have any idea what she was talking about. They're going up and down and talking about this movement and that movement. I'm like, is this real or this is just like art babble so you can make yourself seem, smart, ahead of the game? And it wasn't until I came up with talking about this topic that I really realized that art speak isn't just art babble, although some of it is. Now that I was reading up on it, one of the really, because I'm out here in California, one of the things I looked up was Artspeak New York City, and it has quite a list of all kinds of medium, sculpture, painting, mixed media, photography. It encompasses quite a bit. But one thing that I really, really, really wanted to get out there is that, well, one of the funniest things I found was there was this doctoral student who was in the sciences actually, and he was reading something about the arts, and he decided to he ran across a like an art babble generator, which is actually you could go online and punch in a couple of words here or there, and we'll spit out all the art babble you want. But it'll be just that. It'll just be babble. One thing I did find on the flip side of that is that if art speak is done correctly, it ties in established art movements into what your current vision is, alluding to or referencing or drawing from, which was quite refreshing for me after all these years. I hate to say how many years I was thinking, oh, it's just art speak is art babble. I'm not buying into it. But then did a little bit more research. Am I just talking too much? Should I just go ahead? But I was doing some more.
You're talking about a revelation that you had. That's fine.
Yeah. And I thought about it because I was fumbling through, and I was my one of my favorite scientists, Mr. Oh my gosh, his name just left me. In charge of the New York Planetarium. Come on.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. Good Lord. If you get somebody like that, he doesn't say, well, I think astrophysics is it. No, he starts going back and saying, well, this scientist did this research and this scientist. And I was like, wait a minute, that's kind of like art speak. He's referencing and putting weight to all the things that he said. They do the same thing in math. Like, Einstein's theory of relativity. Well, he calls this mathematician that had this theorem, this formula, and it's same thing in engineering, and everybody else has this. So why not art? You know. So so you can get put up the first picture. I got interesting, you know, and I looked at it, and it's kind of like oh, God bless you, and oh my, that's not fair. That is so not fair. No, well, just the colors and the the abstract realism. You could
Greg, you okay?
I'm in a little bit of pain. I am. The painkillers are are taking a hiatus. And you know, the colors and the realistic, you know, there's, you know, I totally forgot my train of thought. I totally lost my train.
Okay.
Photorealism as opposed to, you know, this kind of made me think of a Fauvism, where it's just colors and you know, elements that are realistic, but elements that are just, you know, so totally like whimsical that they separate them from just classical, you know, classical horizon and sky colors and trees and, you know, reflecting. Or
So are art speaking it at this moment, or you're just describing the image?
well, I'm trying to tie what Artspeak rests on. If it's, I would say if it's truly Artspeak, but if it's okay, because we had this discussion before. Go ahead, you could lose the image, Ken. We had this discussion before about what our influences. You know, we go through all the classwork, and you know, we see all these photographers and painters and everything, and that kind of scrolls in the back of our mind while we're, you know, taking pictures. So the art influence does still influence us, and beyond just just taking a photograph. Now we could say, oh, this is you know, or like Ken, you said, oh, this is like the Haas or Eisenstadt or any of the you know, Frank, you know, the Lee Friedlander, who just does the you know, great street photographs, or for Mark, like the formal portraiture. You know, you could easily say that's Kurt Vanderzee, if you want to call up a black photographer, but then that would be part of your Artspeak. You know, the influences are Vanderzee or Haas or Eisenstadt. You know, and you could incorporate that.
You're talking about citing references as Artspeak, right?
If it's legit, yeah, it's not just now. I've heard, and I'm sure all of you guys have heard, people that just spew, you know, paint and color and light, and it becomes this whole, you know, marsh or mush or whatever, and it's difficult to get through.
Yeah, but I have a sort of a caveat in that idea, which is that one must understand the words being spoken and the history and value of the history of something being written or said, because if they don't, then all that is said in a description is gobbledygook. So if I reference Haas or Vanderzee or anyone, and you have no clue who the hell they are,
right.
That in itself can be considered gobbledygook or Artspeak to that person, because they have no reference to that history.
Right.
And so I think that's a very important for someone to have. So, right, you have that person who's viewing it has to have that reference equally, because if they don't, then they don't make the connection. And so therefore you've lost them in your explanation.
It's the same thing like in engineering. You know, they can say, Well, if you look at Robles Brooklyn Bridge,
Hmm.
is the way he did the construction with the cables and everything supports here, and use that as a reference. But if you don't know the Brooklyn Bridge, never seen it before,
Right.
don't know the difference between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge, you're like,
Right.
it's a bridge, you know?
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's why there was an entire documentary series about the Brooklyn Bridge to explain every aspect of why the bridge was built. And so, I mean, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, you're taking one aspect of sort of an academic approach and saying that that's art speak. I mean, you're saying that an academic approach by citing all these references. And I think Ken's on point when he says, well, and I think you're alluding to it also, is that if you don't know the reference, you don't know what the person's speaking about. But at the same time, if that photograph that you have produced and we showed earlier, I think it's a wonderful photograph because it's got a lot of things going on in it. And in terms of your art speak, I mean, you cited that, oh, it's a little bit like, Potts and maybe some others, but is there any other way that you can infuse a discussion about that image with what you would refer to as art speak?
Well, what my, I would say new understanding, my understanding now is if you ground it in what came before, as opposed to saying, well, I'm this is new, this is fresh, this is no, it's never been done before. That's a little. You really have to produce a lot of work in order to create your own movement. But when you say, well, yeah, this is an homage to impressionism or fauvism or um, several of the other photographic art movements that that play with depth and dimension and such. It helps the it helps ground your artwork with the art speak to back it up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
To some extent.
Yeah. I
All right.
put your words on the screen. So are
I
you
can't see them.
okay? I can read it for you. The importance of good art speak. Lots of influences brought me here, primarily photographic, but I see and feel painterly movements like I think that's Fauvism?
Fauvism, yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Fauvism. Okay, Fauvism and impressionistic influences my vision. The art speak allows the artist to place this image in a time frame and illustrates its influences.
Yeah, I mean, it's instead of it just being a nebulous, you say, oh well, this is in the fashion of Ansel Adams, or photorealism, and everything has to be super crisp, super sharp, or it grounds what you're doing in the art world, like now there was I was reading that there's also now a photographic Black Power movement in art or photographic art with the since again the 10th year anniversary of Trayvon Martin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a whole genre now, or art movement of painters.
Yes.
With the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yes.
And the tears and the violence and the police protests and the street marches, and you have you had some work put in the Museum of the City of New York, I think, Ken.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Of the
The
protests.
Black Lives Matter movement protest. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was gonna put some of those up, but I didn't want to go too far in that. Just to say that um, art art has its own movements, and it does speak its own language. Like now, I mean, it's like because you guys are the tech guys. I'm kind of a little bit on the nebulous creative side, but when you start talking about this camera and what it does, the dynamics of a certain type of lens and full frame sensors and all of that, where I'm like, well, what does the image look like? What did you capture? And I get kind of a little lost in the tech part of it, but you guys are all about the tech, and then Like you can't
Well,
get
I
this.
think about tech to the extent of if it were paint, rather than say something like, well, it's different between oil paint and acrylic. One should know what a triple O Winsor Newton brush does versus a fan brush when pigment is applied to substrate. I mean that's basically about the technical aspects of painting.
Okay, true, right. And it would also go into how it's applied, and because art is okay, art is emotional. If it doesn't hit you in the brain or in the heart or somewhere in the chest in this general region, it's really not kind of doing its job. You should feel somebody. I showed a picture and I was upset that they were like, oh, it's just a beautiful image. I'm like, yeah, but just on the outside is like poverty and homelessness and everything. But they're like, they said no.
Right. And to put what you're saying,
There's
Billy,
nothing wrong with what?
you're talking about story. You're talking about what is the story, or what is the message of the final piece.
Right.
Whether it's an art piece that is a performance piece of some sort, or if it's a still image or a video. What is the message or the story? That's what you're talking about. That has to be or should be emotionally engaging in some way.
Absolutely. And I guess the last thing. Oh, and yeah, I'm sure it still goes on. We should also be glad that we live in a country where we have the freedom of expression, because there are people still, artists still in China that are being, snatched off the street and put into re-education camp because they're expressing a train of thought that the government doesn't think that they should be doing. So being able to express yourselves is something that I think is valuable, and Artspeak is a big part of it. And I think it's something we all should get to know a little better and not laugh at anymore like I used to. Anything. All right. Who's up next? Ken, were you going to take it over from here?
Yeah, I was just going to actually show, because I've been submitting my work to various shows and stuff like that, and actually
Don't stop.
even Photoville. And what I wanted to do was just
You need a
give
minute? You want
you,
Mark to go?
just show you actually the artist statement or the work statement supporting the work
Okay.
that I submitted. Now, you won't see the images, you'll just see the work statement. And I can read the work statement to you.
Yeah,
These are, right, that's okay, I'll read it. These are my images called, and the series' title is called Frame of View. And I think you know my images because they're the low ones from the ground, and all the images are shot from a low angle point. And it's called Frame of View. And the frame of view is I'm framing a specific point of view, and that view is low. So in the work statement that I submitted, I said, in a creative experiment, I explored turning a standard photographic practice into a point of view that is both atypical and surreal. Using perspective to exaggerate scale and proportion, I sought to observe patterns of pedestrian flow as people move about the city's sidewalks and streets from a vantage point not often perceived for a complete series of images. Visualize from the viewpoint of a creature whose height is an inch or two off the ground. If that's too far-fetched, view them as if you're ascending from a cellar or a sewer. The results were to challenge my comfort zone as a photographer as well as that of a viewer. So I don't place it in any standard, I don't place it in the history of imagery. I just speak to what I'm getting across. And actually what a little bit of my technical, but not much, right? But more of what I'm trying to get across.
Okay.
Without being Artspeak, because I don't think this is Artspeak, but you tell me. Does it sound like Artspeak? Does it sound complex and convoluted?
No, it sounds like a description of your thought process and what you captured.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I wish I had pulled down because I read an excerpt from Susan Sontag, and in a way it made more sense now. I wish I had pulled that clip down, or I could read it, but my image would go away. But yeah, read. I mean, that was descriptive. It said what you're doing, your thought process, and if you have the image in front of you, you can see what it is that you're doing.
Right.
Whereas, Artspeak might be, you might say, I'm sure there's an art movement. You could say, oh, well, where Ken Dinsky took an abstract and he stretch buildings, to
Yeah.
infinity, or
Mhm.
you said how one of your other street photographers shot everything at eye level.
Mhm.
You're changing the perspective or the paradigm and saying, well, I'm going to go against that and
Right.
try something different in this
Right.
way.
Right.
I think the line that catches me is the viewpoint from a creature 1 to 2 inch tall.
Yeah.
I think that right there, for me, it's magical. I mean, that tells me, a Smurf's point of view, or some other creature, or a minion, or something very diminutive
Uh-huh.
that doesn't have our sense of scale.
Exactly.
In that respect, that series makes a lot of sense, because you're not just framing it, but you're couching the whole concept in the empathy for a smaller being. And that's
Exactly.
pretty good. I like that.
Okay, cool. But yeah, okay. I think we're coming to an agreement on this slowly but surely. All right. You got anything else, Mr. Nelson?
No, that's all I got.
All right. You're up, Mr. Skinner.
Okay. When you first talked to us and said, "Oh, it's going to be Artspeak," I thought about it in terms of, you can put the picture. I was thinking about it in terms of the cynical side of what people usually say derisively is Artspeak. And so there'll be this fuzzy picture, on the wall, and then you have to kind of make sense of it, and see the artistic merits in it.
Uh-huh.
And so, for me, the types of cynical things that people tended to grab onto when they talk about Artspeak is that this particular image is sculptural, or it's inviting, or it has a lot of well, inviting and sculpture. That's good.
Yeah.
Like painterly qualities.
And painterly qualities, because it's not focused, right?
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, there's really kind of one word in photography, and it's really graphic.
We lost you, Mark.
It's very graphic.
Mark, we lost you there for a sec. We lost you there for a sec.
There's that one word. The one word is graphic. That really, it just sits there and says, this is, how one should really look at a photograph initially. Is it a graphic work of art? I mean, it's built into the word. And so, yes, you've got this huge, big, dark patch, and then you've got these sort of amorphous shapes. And depending on your age, or your how familiar you are with sort of a ceramic cup, you'll kind of know that this is a fuzzy close-up of a ceramic cup. But this is a really good sketch, right? That's another art word, right? A sketch.
Yep.
So you would take this photograph as a sketch, and then maybe you would add some brown liquid, and you'd light that, or maybe you'd wait until you're in a place like a coffee shop, where the light is hitting it just right, and you actually see a little bit of the bubbles from freshly poured coffee. I mean, everybody has those latte photos where they make all sorts of shapes in the foam at the top.
Uh-huh.
But you really don't see a lot of old-fashioned just plain coffee photographs. It's kind of pedestrian. But the idea is that, in a photograph like this, you're sort of testing the viewer's visual literacy, right? You're saying, do you understand what you're seeing, and can you understand that this is a ceramic cup? And then at the same time, you're asking them to make their own conclusions about the validity of taking that particular viewpoint and creating a still piece of artwork and submitting it for public consumption.
Mhm.
And you're asking them to sort of make their own decision about whether it's justified, or it's valid, or whatever else you want to say about it. But I think sculptural is probably the most nebulous Artspeak word I can think of for this particular image.
Is it possible, and not this is not in question in reference to your photo, but just in general, is it possible that Artspeak is being used so as not to directly focus in any one specific direction, but to give it a broad sense and not really focus you in any which way?
See, when Greg first mentioned Artspeak, I wasn't really thinking about the idea of academic citing references for, basically,
Yeah.
Here in New York, people, they don't really do this so much anymore. But when we were young, people used to say things like, hey, it's like this, it's like that, it's like this, it's like that. And that's kind of a way of, not so academically, but citing references,
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have a photograph and you say, oh, well, that's like a close-up of something that Cortege would do, or Paul Outerbridge, or, people sort of go to their, show my age, their Rolodex of images that they have as a reference. And you were saying, if you don't know the reference, then it's all gobbledygook to you.
Right.
Well, that's true. But I think Artspeak tends, in the sense that I hear people use the word speak after art, tends to be a little bit more derisive, and it tends to be a little bit more an attempt to describe how people ascribe qualities and values to a visual piece that don't necessarily hold true for most of the viewers.
Yeah.
Like the best word is magical. That's one of the best words for, they talk about a certain quality of light in the afternoon. The entire industry is built on a light quality of dusk being called magic, right? Right? I mean, it's fascinating, but is it really magic? No, it happens every day. It has certain scientific properties. It has effects on everything that you view.
So will we say that salesmanship is part and parcel of the art statement, Artspeak?
I would say yes.
Right.
Wholeheartedly.
So you got to sell it.
Oh, yeah.
It's selling it.
In some respect, selling it. In some respect,
I personally,
Mark, go ahead. We lost
from
you.
what I understand, the most successful are the artists that we know of tend to be quite capitalistic. I mean, they don't seem to be. They're not communists, from what I can tell.
Right, but they're not mostly the likely ones to write a gobbledygooked artist statement. They're probably a little bit more, but I think we're separating maybe the capitalist version versus the fine art, artistic aspect of the world.
Well, I mean, there are attempts to intellectualize the experience of viewing artwork, and I think those attempts, when verbalized, they lose a lot of people. I mean, a lot of times, I mean, I could go on a long imaginary story about how one got to that cup of coffee and what has happened after got to the cup, because it's not necessarily coffee, gotten to the cup, and what happens directly after the instant I've taken the photograph. And, depending on how you've edited that story before and after, you raise the significance of that work in the mind of the viewer.
Yeah.
If you've placed the right story notes.
Yeah, that's selling it.
in a way, because last week, or I think it was last week, we were talking about like a legitimate image. When it's legitimate to photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, when the Dutch masters, everything had to be super real. You couldn't draw or you couldn't paint unless you could draw or paint a realistic image of a person.
Yeah.
Or if you couldn't render fabric, and you couldn't tell that it was wool as opposed to satin or silk. You weren't considered a decent artist. Then the French were like, well, I think I'm going to go and do some impressionistic work. And it was like, it was a shock to the system when he did the lilies, and it's all just spots of color. People are like, what the hell is that? What do you new? And in a lot of ways, it's the photography is going through the same thing, because It's a super realistic medium with certain limitations, but if you push the boundaries, you could come up with some really cool stuff.
Well, I
And
mean,
I think the language has to keep up with it. That's what I'm saying. That's the importance I feel now. I have a new respect for Artspeak, and that the language has to keep up with the imagery. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
No, I was gonna say you were talking about pointillism, where they were trying to replicate how vision works and how they feel that how they felt the light would vibrate in their eyes, and they kind of got a sense of how retina worked. And so I get that. And then, but it wasn't the gallery wasn't the F1.9 club, is the F64, right? And so photography at one point, as you said, the whole idea was to get as much in focus as humanly possible and still get a sharp image that wasn't impeded by too much blur, right? And the technology, as you said, has gotten so good that at this point, there's so much about bokeh and how to get the shallowest depth of field possible. It's the exact opposite, because the rendering devices have become very adept at getting an entire field in focus from a few inches away from the lens all the way through to infinity.
Or vice versa, where the eyes are in focus and the nose is out of focus, and
Well,
everything.
that's what I'm saying.
Really,
That's what I'm saying. That is really what people are doing more than previously. I mean, you guys know when we were in school, it would have there would have been a number of photographs that people would have said, well, it's just out of focus.
Yeah.
Right.
Or they would have said, well, you've got the eyes in focus, but the nose isn't, so maybe you should
Maybe you should try it again.
revisit that subject and try F5.6. I mean,
I remember taking a picture of you in Israel, and you were looking out of the frame, and the edge of the frame was in front of your face instead of giving you the lead room and having all the space in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my instructors, you're like, no, go back and do that. I don't think you. But I was like, wait a minute. I feel my view is that, yeah, I want to put him right here because what's happening and they were adamantly convinced that I did it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You should have supplied them with an artist statement before you showed it to them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
okay, guys, before we go on,
that's a good topic for another discussion.
Exactly. Before we go on, let's sort of try and shut this conversation
wrap it up. Yeah, this is longer than I had.
Yeah.
I'm surprised because I didn't think you guys would be into this at all. But I gotcha.
You got us good.
Well, if you guys don't have anything else.
No, I think, for me, no.
I think we covered it. Okay, maybe.
Yeah, or something that we can go on, because I think what we've done is we've focused on certain aspects of Artspeak, but I think maybe next time we may want to focus a little bit more on the funny side of the Artspeak, which is the gobbledygook itself. Give examples of that which is way out there in outer space to some.
Okay. Works for me. I'll be better prepared. Well, if that's all we got, thanks for joining us in this episode of Three Black Pratt Crads. I'm still Greg Claiborne. That's still Ken Nelson, and that's still Mark Skinner. Please leave a comment, hit that bell, subscribe, and let us know if you have any comments or questions or any ideas for a topic. If you want to come on and go live with us, let us know. Until the next time, keep shooting and say what? Get into